Well, hello and welcome back to another True Crime Time with Junebug. That's me. 1. It is 100 degrees outside according to my thermometer on the porch, and inside it's 80, and I'm downstairs. Upstairs is probably about 90. We don't have air. We have window units and 3 fans. 2 window units and 3 fans. 1 window unit per floor. And yes, it is still 80 and 90 respectively at our house. But I turned off the window unit and the fan down here, and oh boy, I could feel it. So that's why I didn't put any makeup on minus mascara, because you would literally just see drips. I'm just too sticky. And also, what am I doing with my hair? I don't know. It's also very gross. So we'll see how this goes. But just don't look at me in this video, please. Thank you. So let's get into it. So I do want to note, because I was going through this case, I'm like, this sounds kind of familiar. It's because Bailey Sarian, which I like watching Bailey Sarian and Kendall Ray are like the 2 true crimes I'm subscribed to. That's it. But just so you know, if you don't like my video, you can go watch Bailey's of this. So today, instead of talking about, well, we'll talk about the victims, but due to this fella being a serial killer, we're gonna he's gonna be the focal point. So today's asshole is John Christie, or the Rillington Place Strangler. So yes, this is about John Christie. This takes place between August 24th of 1943 to March 6th of 1953. So 10 years. And I always say the ages of the victims in case anything with children bothers you. And there is a range, because I mentioned he's a serial killer, but it ranges from 1 to 54. So if anything with kids bothers you, I'm sorry. If you need to leave, it's okay. But as I mentioned, this takes place in 10 Rillington Place, Notting Hill, London. So back across the pond again, as I said in the previous video. And as you know, when I covered the Hammersmith case, I'm not great with pronouncing these names, and I'm sorry in advance. So just to be warned, and I guess a tiny silver lining is it is a solved case. 99%, pretty much. But we'll get to that at the end. So I always start with some pop culture references because this one's pretty well known, there's a lot, so you may have seen some of these things, and I realized this was the inspiration behind it. So there is a play called Christie in Love by Howard Brenton, which came out in 1969. There's a movie called 10 Rillington Place, starring Richard Attenborough, that came out in 1971. There is a 3-part BBC crime drama starring Tim Roth in 2016. So that one's, holy crap, almost 10 years old. I was gonna say pretty new, but pushing a decade. There's a series of paintings, like legit paintings, by Brett Whiteley that he painted in the 1960s. There's a novel called 13 Steps Down by Ruth Rendell that came out in 2004. There's another book called The Peep Show, The Murders at 10 Rillington Place by Kate Summerscale, and that came out in 2024, so just last year. And there's other things. These were the main, like the big ones. And again, note, I have 8.5 pages of notes, but I'm not gonna be able to fit every fact and detail into this. We're gonna be here all day if that was the case. So if I miss anything, I'm sorry. But we shall begin with the asshole. He was born John Reginald Halliday Christie, and he was born April 8th of 1899. Me and John Christie were not born in the same year. He was born in 1899 in Northerham, to Ernest John Christie and Mary Hannah Halliday Christie. He was the 6th out of 7 kids I saw, and he had a troubled relationship with his father. As we've seen throughout, like, if you're a true crime consumer, you know sometimes a lot of these serial killers don't have the best relationship with their parents or the best upbringings. It's not an excuse, but it's a reoccurring theme. He was also, it said, coddled, but then also bullied by his mom and his older sisters, so it was very, not a stable home. Now, when he was about 11 to 12 years old, his grandpa would die at their house because his grandpa was sick and he was just living with them, like, to get care. And then it was said that after his grandpa died, John had always, like, feared his grandpa, but he got a feeling of power and a sense of well-being seeing his grandpa's corpse just laying out, like, waiting for the coroner. Like, it felt powerful to him to know that he was once terrified of this man, but now this man is just a shell, like he's dead, in a sense. So that's a bit creepy. Now, at age 11, he attended Halifax Secondary School, where his favorite and best subject was math. And I found he had an IQ of about 128, which is another thing that creeps me out sometimes in these cases. A common denominator with serial killers is they have a scaringly, an unalarmingly high IQ sometimes. Now, John left school in 1913. I don't know if that meant he graduated or he just left. I think he just left. But he left and started work as an assistant projectionist, which basically they just run the projector at the movies. A lot more involved back then. Now, later in life, his peers would describe him as, quote, a queer lad, or, quote, was not very popular. They also called him, quote, Reggie No Dick, and can't do it Christie. Can't do it Christie. Because starting in his teen years, and going forward through the rest of his life, he had erectile dysfunction. I don't know how his peers knew this. I don't know if he tried to hook up with a lady and she spread it around the school or what. But, like, everyone seemed to know he just had erectile dysfunction. Kind of a weird fact to know about someone, but, you know, here we are. He later stated in life that he could actually only perform, like, the sex with prostitutes. I don't know how to feel about that. Now, John was in the British Army during World War I, where he was injured from a mustard gas attack, which he claimed left him blind and mute for 3.5 years, which was never found to be true. It was thought he exaggerated the story due to his histrionic personality disorder, which I never heard of this. So basically, it made him do attention-seeking behavior. Which, doing this research, I get that vibe from John. Now, after mustard gas situation, he would join the Air Force on December 13th of 1923, but was discharged less than a year later. Now, between him leaving the Army and joining the Royal Air Force, he would marry Ethel Simpson on May 10th of 1920. It didn't seem to be a great marriage from the get-go. He kept seeing sex workers, and Ethel suffered a miscarriage pretty early on. Obviously not her fault, like, her having a miscarriage, like, I think you know what I'm trying to say. That just adds strain to a relationship. And then they went their separate ways 4 years after their marriage. Now, they split. Ethel went and did normal people things. And John, well, let me tell you what John did. Well, he did crime, to put it lightly. And when he got out of prison in January 1934, we're jumping ahead of it, they got back together. I don't know why. Maybe because back then, like, well, yeah, you get married, you kind of have to just stay with it. But anyway, they got back together like 10 years later, and they moved into 10 Rillington Place. So during that 10 years that they were separated and Ethel's doing normal people things and John's doing crime, here's kind of more of in detail of what John was doing. For those 10 years, he was in and out of prison / jail. So fun. He was in and out of prison for stealing money orders, obtaining money illegally and violently, I saw. He was guilty of larceny. He was guilty of assaulting someone with a cricket bat, and then also auto theft. So John was very busy doing all the crime in that 10 years. Now that, I guess, petty crime, if you want to call it, well, compared to his future crimes, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. Once him and Ethel got together, he didn't really seem to do really any of the petty crime anymore. He would still hire prostitutes, I saw. So that's great. But then also, like a little bit after they got back together, he got to join the War Reserve Police during World War II. And you're thinking, wait, doesn't he have a criminal background? He does. They just forgot to look at it. As simple as that. That's how he was able to join. And I'm guessing because it's World War II, they weren't overly concerned in being super tedious with background checks. So between about 1939 to mid-1943, he would have an affair with a woman he met at this like war police job. I forgot her name, but my favorite part of this case / story is when her husband, the married woman he's having an affair with, came back from the war. He learned about the affair and went to John's house and beat the shit out of him. So that made me smile. I never hear about that lady again. I just think the husband beat him up and then they just continued on their merry way. I don't know. Now after this, his crimes took a turn for the worst, to say the least, and he started to kill. And we will now be following the timeline of his murders / victims, now that we got a bit of a background on John. So the first known victim, I'll explain at the end, but we're just gonna say this is the first victim. Her name was Ruth First. I want to pronounce it First, but I don't think it's pronounced First, but Ruth First. Now, Ruth was said to be a tall, pretty lady and full of life. She was 21 when she met John. She was also a refugee from Austria, because, you know, World War II was happening. I saw that she had a pretty good upbringing, but Hitler and World War II, you know, kind of threw a wrench in that. That's why she had to leave Austria. So she fled to London, fell in love, and had a baby girl named Christina in 1942. But I don't know if this is 100% true, so take it with a grain of salt. Now, sadly, the father of her baby left her, and her baby was taken away. And as with the Hammersmith case, she would end up having to work as a prostitute to help make ends meet. But her main job, because she did prostitution on the side, her main job was a munitions worker. Now, and on March 24th, 1943, she met John at a bar in Ladbroke Grove whilst trying to get clients, doing her night job, so to speak. He took her to his home, 10 Rillington Place. Ethel, his wife, was out of town, and they did, you know, the sex. And during the sex, he said he would, like later, he said he impulsively strangled her with a rope until she died. And then he would stow her body under the floorboards until the next day when he would bury her in their garden. I do want to know, I saw a source that said he may have killed her because he got like a note Ethel was coming home early, but I feel like he would have killed her either way, in my personal opinion. Now, after her murder, John would resign as that reserve war policeman, and he would start working at a radio factory as a clerk the next year. Here, he would meet his future second victim. So, second victim, her name was Muriel Amelia Eady. Now, Muriel was a 31-year-old woman who had spent most of her childhood in and out of foster care / orphan homes, children homes. And later in life, she would move in with an aunt and start working at the same radio factory as John. Now, they seemed to know each other on like a standard coworker level. No like affairs were happening or anything, just coworkers. Now, on October 7th, 1944, John would invite Muriel over to his home, promising he had created a mixture to cure her bronchitis. I don't know why she thought he could just magically do that. Maybe she was desperate. In reality, the mixture she was inhaling was not curing her bronchitis. It was Friar's balsam, and coal gas, which coal gas I saw is 15% carbon monoxide. So she fell unconscious. It didn't kill her. John did that because John would then rape her and strangle her, much like his first victim, and he would bury her next to Ruth in the garden. I don't like John, just so you know. So I don't know what all John was up to the next 4 years, because remember his crimes spanned a 10-year period. But he did get a new job at some point, no more Radio Factory. He started working at a post office savings bank. Not 100% sure what that is, but he got that job on March 21st, 1946. And during spring of 1948, his next victims would move into the top floor of 10 Rillington Place. So the third and fourth victims and sort of fifth victim are, it looks like her name's Beryl and Geraldine Evans, and then in a sense, Timothy Evans. Timothy and Beryl Evans had moved in, and then in October of 1948, their daughter Geraldine was born. The couple was known to have financial troubles and would frequently fight loudly and sometimes physically, according to neighbors. And in late 1949, Timothy would call the police to say his wife was dead. I know we're jumping ahead of it, but it's just, there wasn't a ton about up until the murders. Now, police did a search of the property and found the bodies of both Beryl and Geraldine. It was like an outdoor wash house. They were both found to be strangled, and Beryl had bruises all over her face. And Timothy would actually admit that Beryl died from a botched abortion attempt performed by John. Again, I don't know why people seem to think John can do medical things. There's nowhere in his resume that I've seen where he worked in the medical field. I don't know. Anyway, with time, the police would essentially beat a confession out of Timothy. I don't know if they physically beat him, but they got a confession out of him. He would eventually recant his statement and fully blame John for the deaths. And side note, I am leaving out chunks of this situation because the 3 through 5 victims could be their own video. And if you want to see that, let me know. However, during Timothy's trial, John would be the principal witness against him. John would deny the allegations against him and would give detailed evidence about how often and how loud and sometimes physical the fights between Timothy and his wife were. They also couldn't afford another child, so that's why they say she died from the botched abortion. They just couldn't afford the other child, so they tried to not have it. Now, at some point, the jury would learn about John's criminal background, but they didn't seem to care, and they found Timothy guilty anyway. And pretty fast, might I add. He tried to appeal his case, it failed, and he was hung on March 9th of 1950. Again, I could do a whole video just on Timothy and that situation, and just how this poor man got screwed over. Just, that whole family's dead because of John. Yeah, spoiler alert, Timothy didn't do it. It was John. I know you're probably very shocked. Now, after this, just destroying this whole family, John just, went on with his life. He started working for the British Road Services, and new people moved into the building, because whole family's dead. Someone else can move in. But the new neighbors were from the West Indies, it said, and John and Ethel hated this because turns out they are very racist. Maybe that's what brought them together. I don't know. Now on to the 6th victim, which was his lovely wife, Ethel. So I guess John had just gone too long without killing someone, because he decided on the morning of December 14th, 1952 to just strangle Ethel in bed, might I add. I don't know if they were doing sexy things or if he's just you know what? You don't get to breathe anymore. I also don't quite know why he killed her. Probably just because he sucks. That's my hypothesis. do with that what you will. He would, after Ethel obviously was killed by him, he disposed of her body, but he would invent so many stories about her whereabouts because obviously people noticed her absence. He also like made up stories about where she was, who she was with, like she ran off with another lover, or she was back home, or she was traveling abroad for funsies. It was so many stories. He would also respond to her family's letters saying he had to write them now due to Ethel's, what is it called? Oh, I didn't write it down, but is it rheumatoid arthritis? But essentially her hands were just in too much pain. She couldn't write, so John had to write the notes for her. And that is why it's in his handwriting and such. I want to know what the family thought, if they could just, if there was a vibe. But around this time, John would just stop working and he would just start selling Ethel's things. Like, that was his job now, selling his stuff. He would also, for a living, quotations around that, forge her signature and just empty her bank account. So, you know, that's a way to make a living. And then, you know, John being John, we're now on to the 7th victim, which is Rita Nelson. Now, Rita Elizabeth Nelson was born October 16th, 1927 in Belfast. When she met John, she was in town visiting her sister, I saw, and she was 6 months pregnant. I don't 100% know if this is true, but saw she was a sex worker and went to John to terminate her pregnancy. Again, if it is true, why do people keep going to John for medical things? A bronchitis, abortion, another abortion. Why John? I don't know if he like learned some stuff when he served in the wars. I don't know. They keep going to him for medical things. Now, at his place, about to perform the abortion according to one article, or do the sex according to other articles, he would actually just knock her out with his signature gas method, the one he used to kill Muriel, his first victim. No, second victim. She was the second victim. It was used first on her. First used on her, the second victim. There we go. Sorry. So he used that to knock her out. He would then rape her while slowly strangling her to death with rope, if you needed to know the specifics. But Rita died on January 19th, 1953 at the age of 25. He would then just kind of wrap her up in some blankets like a burrito and stow her body in an alcove behind a kitchen wall. This is where I'm hoping there's like a layout of the building I could find to put in here, because the logistics of this kind of confuse me. Because we have like an alcove, but we don't have to like go through a wall to get there. I don't quite know. Hopefully I could find a picture. Also, side note, these last 3 victims were all about a month apart from each other when they happened. So I don't really have many John updates in this time period. So we're just jumping straight to the 8th victim, which is Kathleen Maloney. Now, I saw the least about Kathleen, not that I've had a ton of info about the other girls, but like there was nothing on Kathleen. I saw that it was said she was a sex worker in the area, and we know John loves sex workers, but he got Kathleen back to his place, used his gas method, and did the exact same thing he did to Rita, to her, which was, you know, rape, strangle, wrap in blankets, put body in the alcove. You know, just classic John things. Now, Kathleen was killed in February of 1953 at the age of 26. So on to his 9th and most likely final victim, which 9 I feel like is just too many. 1 is one too many in my personal opinion. The 9th victim is Hectorina McLennan. Hectorina was born February 18th, 1926 in Glasgow, Scotland. Parents were William and Marion McLennan. Saw she had a daughter named Marion, born in Kensington, England. I saw one source said she had 2 kids. They didn't say like a name or a gender for the other kid, they just said she had 2, but most articles I saw said she just had the one. But her daughter's name was Marion, after her mom, I presume. And I don't know anything about the daughter except based off of Ancestry.com. She passed in 2019. Now, when Hectorina met John, she was living in a cafe in London. So I assume it's like a apartment above a cafe situation and not like her and her man just sleeping in the booths. Because yeah, she was living with her boyfriend and his name was Alex Baker. They would end up staying at 10 Rillington Place whilst looking for another place to live. So they left the cafe, moved in with John whilst looking for like a more permanent situation. John at some point would persuade Hectorina to come to his place alone, where he would repeat the same exact process as he did with the previous two victims, making her the third and final body added to the alcove. He killed her on March 6, 1953. She was only 27. John would also check in with Alex, her Hectorina's boyfriend, and would help, quotations around help try to find Hectorina for him. Like, would help go out looking with him, ask constantly, almost daily for a while, like any news about her. Just, being a little asshole. I don't know what ended up happening to Alex or what he did. John didn't kill him. I'm 99% sure, but I don't know if he just gave up and moved. Like, I don't know what happened with Alex. Now, a few weeks after this, the three victims, bam, bam, bam. On March 20th, 1953, John would actually move out of 10 Rillington Place, and he let another couple sublet it. However, the same day he left, the landlord of the building came over and saw it was not John living there, it was this random couple. So he told the random couple, "You gotta go, be out by the morning." And then, this part confuses me a little bit, but the landlord let the man who lived in the top part of 10 Rillington Place, he let him use John's kitchen. I don't know if he didn't have a kitchen up there or he just wanted the bigger one. I don't quite know, but he let this man use John's kitchen. Now, 4 days later, this upstairs tenant was using the kitchen and he was trying to install a radio onto the back wall of the kitchen. And as you probably could have guessed, when he was trying to nail up that radio, he found the bodies of Rita, Kathleen, and Hectorina. Police were contacted, thankfully, and the search for John began. He had actually booked a stay at a hostel. I saw he booked for a week, but he left after 4 days when the news broke about the bodies being found at his place. And he used his real name and like address to book the hostel, so he had to get out of there. Now he would spend the next week just kind of wandering around London and sleeping and eating where he could. And on March 31st, John was arrested near the Putney Bridge. They found a newspaper clipping about Timothy Evans on him, so that's a bit incriminating and rude. Now, John would only admit to killing his wife and the 3 women that were found in the alcove, but when the police told him they had found 2 other bodies on his property, the ones in the garden, he's like, yeah, okay, I did those too. He would also eventually admit to killing Beryl Evans. Never 100% confessed if he killed Geraldine. That's still up in there. I think he did. So his trial began on June 22nd, 1953, in the same courtroom Timothy's trial was 3 years prior. I think it's fitting. For some reason, he would actually only be tried for the murder of Ethel, his wife. I didn't really see a clear answer of why. Maybe just to save time, because it's pretty obvious he's guilty. But he was only tried for Ethel's murder. He would also try, as it's pretty common in these cases, he would try for the not guilty by the reason of insanity plea. It did not work. And after less than 2 hours, the jury came back and found him guilty. Which, are we surprised? I'm honestly surprised it took like 2 hours. And the judge would give him the death sentence. John would actually say a little bit later he wouldn't be trying to make an appeal or trying to fight this. He kind of just accepted his fate. So he was hung on July 15th, 1953, 9 a.m. at H.M. Prison, Pentonville. His executioner was Albert Pierrepoint, the same man who did Timothy's execution 3 years prior. And also, apparently Albert Pierrepoint is a very famous executioner. if you want to check him out. So was his dad and his uncle. That's just like a family business, I guess. That creeps me out a little bit. I saw, this also kind of made me giggle, that John was complaining that his nose was itchy, like whilst they're preparing for his execution. And Albert stated, quote, "It won't bother you for long," end quote. That's a very fair point, Albert. John was then hung and buried in an unmarked grave on prison grounds. Now let's get into the aftermath. It has been speculated for years that John could have had more victims. This is why I say, like, at the beginning, like, first known victim, but pretty much first victim, or like the pretty much final victim, because it's not 100% known if these are his only victims. I wouldn't be surprised if there's more, but we can't really ask him. Even the famous pathologist Keith Simpson, I did a video on him. Don't worry, he's fine. He didn't do any crimes. I just thought he was interesting and did a video about him, so I will link that for the end of the video. But Keith Simpson, thought there could definitely be more victims that they have yet to uncover or ever uncover, because I saw, even despite people thinking there could be more victims, literally no attempts have been made to connect him to other murders. There's no, like, them checking missing persons or missing women around the time in this area. They're just like, done. He's dead, he's gone, we're done. And then, so some are like, yeah, there might be more victims. Maybe we should look into that, but then there's some who don't. There's the speculation, a lot of it because he only seemed to kill people at his home, and he only ever killed people that we're aware of at 10 Rillington Place. So people think, like, he couldn't, like, mentally he couldn't do it anywhere else, but I don't know. But speaking of victims, Timothy, the man who was wrongly executed for killing his wife and daughter and unborn child, he was later to be found innocent, and in 2003, a while later, his sisters were awarded payments for compensation in the injustice that occurred. I don't know how much, but I guarantee it's not enough. I saw, like, they didn't officially, like, I think it's get the case squashed, or legally change it, but everyone's like, yeah, no, he didn't do it. And the fact that they offered the sisters compensation. But that is it. That is the case about John Christie at 10 Rillington Place. As I said at the beginning, I obviously do not list every fact in detail. But if you want to check out Bailey Sarian's video, I think she does have a little bit more info. I won't be offended. I understand completely. Well, I don't know what I am covering next. I don't think it's in England again. I don't think it's the mid-1900s again, because I realize the acid bath killer was also around this time. And the Hammersmith murders. Let me see. Oh, my bad. The Hammersmith murders occurred like a decade later, but still, poor London, jeez. Anyway, thank you for watching, especially if you made it this long. I know this was another longer video. Well, below, I will, in the description box, I will try to link what graves I can. Not John's, but list the victims' graves that I can, so you can always see, like, a bit more about them if it's been updated. You can also leave kind words or a flower, or you can even plant a tree in their memory if any of you were interested in that. But again, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.